General, about how old is this organization here in Illinois, and how did you happen to get involved with it?
Well, Tim and Ian can tell you more about how old Illinois Fathers is, because I just got in about a year ago. We had our first annual Fatherless Day rally, and I think 6 months before that, they called me on the phone and they asked me if I would be their keynote speaker for the first annual Fatherless Day rally. We held that in Springfield, and we just had our second one this past June 18th. And the keynote speaker there was Dr. Stephen Baskerville, who is a leading expert in this area and author of Taken into Custody. Isn't that the name of his book?
Taken into Custody.
But what I really want to stress is Illinois Fathers is a parental rights organization, because we have mothers, we have grandparents, we got people that run the whole gamut who says this system is broken. And historically, like you said, people just assume the mother is going to be the primary caregiver, and even though the mother may have never been involved in the child's life prior to that. The court system is set up now that they want to have an adversarial process, and the ABA is definitely behind this, because they get more money the more they bring you into court. Okay, and every lawyer I talk to, if they have any decency or any conscience, they tell me that they don't want to be involved in family court, because they see what goes on in there, and they'd rather do personal injury, they'd rather do criminal law, civil, anything other than family court, because they see how messed up family court is. And the research bears it out. And I mean, since the beginning of time, God made man and he made woman, and he made both of them to raise a family up together. You know, after all these thousands of years, or millions, however you want to go back, man and women have raised children together. Now in the last 30 or 40, they decided, whoever decided, the court systems, our legislators, well, we'll have a primary caregiver, and whoever doesn't win, they'll be relegated to 4 days a month, where you used to have your child 30 days out of a month. Now you're down to 4 days a month. And social ills bears it out. I mean, kids are not performing in school. They're joining gangs. They're more likely to take drugs, commit suicide. And the research bears it out that those kids come from fatherless homes.
Would you say that what is happening today is a result of legislative, or the lack of legislative guidance, or is it the judges, or is it a combination of both?
It's a combination of all of them, because
it's a very complex system.
It started with legislation, but then there is some legislation in place, but it's not enforced because our courts are so gender biased. Okay. Then you have judges who have discretion, and they will rather regulate that to, well, we just go with the standard. Okay. We're not going to look at any individual case. The standard is every other weekend, and maybe 3 hours through the week on the off week, and we're going to stick with that.
In some instances it can be legislative, some instances it can be procedural. There is a lot of different pieces that come into play. Some of it is political, in fact. For instance, the visitation cycle, you might say, well, how do you come about every other weekend and Wednesday nights? How does that standard come into play? I mean, because if you read Illinois state law, it says maximum participation of both parents is in the best interest of children. And you're thinking to yourself, well, how does that translate into every other weekend? So we start to break that down. We start to figure out where that comes from. If you go to a county-by-county basis to any courthouse within the state of Illinois and ask them for their recommended visitation guidelines, they'll give you a copy of it. And if you read those recommended visitation guidelines, it's what's in your court order. So that's procedural.
How does Illinois compare with other states?
It
Is there
depends.
anything unusual about Illinois, or is this just typical across the nation?
Illinois is a little bit behind the curve in comparison to some other states. I mean, it depends. There are some states that are worse than Illinois as well. But I know that recently, I think if I remember correctly, Washington State recently released a study about timeshare allocations with parents in a post-divorce state, and it was far more favorable than what Illinois has. So there are states out there that handle things a lot differently than we do.
Is your mission as an organization to try to bring about change, either in terms of legislation or through the judicial process, or both?
What we really want is a concept that's called shared parenting.
Shared parenting.
Instead of, again, the way it is now, where the winner has ownership of the child and the loser is authorized to visit. We believe in more of a shared parenting model, where both parents as they are typically before the divorce or separation, where they remain to be equally involved with the children in the aftermath.
Yeah, you know, Andre, that seems so funny because when they're married, okay, we both share in the discipline of the child, we both share in the responsibilities of that child, and the upbringing of that child, and the education, the religious background of that child. But the minute the judge says, okay, this is a final decree, now all of a sudden, one of us is not capable of being able to fulfill those obligations. And why is that? You know?
As you put it that way, it doesn't really make sense, and it certainly is the normal format that we normally see or hear about in terms of when a divorce, the wife normally gets the custody, the father at best gets a visitation 2 or 3 times a week, if that much. And,
If that much,
right.
yeah, that's best case scenario. Really.
And certainly that's not, you know, while it seems like it's the norm within our state to operate in that capacity, it is not without exception. There are some judges across our state who do stand up and say, no, that we need to have the parents involved. We have judges out of Cook County, we have judges out of Sangamon County that sit back and say, the two of you need to stop fighting over your kids. It's time for you all to decide on a parenting plan, decide on how you're going to raise your kids, because that's the important aspect of this case. And those judges, while priceless in their wisdom, are few and far between, but they are there. And you can see the lessons from the families that go through their courts, the lack of animosity that exists afterwards, the involvement of the parents in the children's lives, and the well-being of those children going through those courts in comparison to other courts where there might be holdover judges from the tender years doctrine era. You could start to see the differences in the raising of those children and the impacts on their lives. And I think that's really key to helping build social acceptance, to keeping parents involved in their children's lives.
Are there other states that have similar organizations to what the 3 of you are trying to do here in Illinois?
Oh, yeah. We're an affiliate of our national organization, which is ACFC, American Coalition of Fathers and Children. And although other states may not have an affiliation with them, we have this in almost every state. There's a fathers organization. Although I did have a guy call me when I was returning from D.C. a month ago. He told me that Maryland didn't have anything like that. You know, they didn't have a father's rights or nobody looking out for fathers there. And I told him, well, what he need to do is get the people together, and they need to organize, okay? And then you need to be down there at the courts. And I asked them to call our national affiliate, and they would tell them how to get started. And for those out there, you know, we're looking to increase our membership. We're looking to increase participation. We have members here in Peoria, although they're not very active. We have one who is extremely active, but we have a lot on our roster, but they don't get involved. We had a support group that we had meeting down at the main library, and I couldn't get the people to show up, but everybody wants to call when their court case comes up, and they want to do a court watch, you know, but we need more than that. We need active participation. We need to stick together on this, and I don't know if Tim said it before, but our website is illinoisfathers.org. Okay. So membership is free. You go to the website and sign up. And Ian is very, very excellent with the technical skills and the website, and as far as finding forms that you might need. We don't give you legal advice because we're not attorneys, but a lot of the processes are general in nature, and he's done a wonderful job in that. So any questions you have, or you can contact one of us through there. You can go to board@illinoisfathers.org, and we'll all receive an email, and we can all answer any questions you might have. One thing I did want to bring up, though, is we had a movie last month that Illinois Fathers put on, and it was held at Manual High School. Yes, I was going to attend that, and I don't drive at night, and everybody I called was occupied. You didn't call me, I'd have got you there. But we had a couple hundred people show up. Great. And what was really astounding was the producer of the film, James Morton. He did an exercise. He asked the men in the room that were 30 and under to stand up, and then he asked them a question. He said, if your mom and dad were not married when you were born, please sit down. and more than half of those guys sat down. Okay. Then he said, now I just want to ask one more question. If your mom and dad are still not together, then sit down. Do you know it was only 3 guys still standing after, I think it was 60 of them that stood up at first. There was only 3 guys still standing.
Wow.
And that shows, especially in the African American community, the disparity. You're going to be affected by it even more because we don't have the economic resources that other cultures might have. It affects us education-wise. It affects us economically. There's more of us going to prison. Okay, and if you don't start getting these fathers back in these kids' lives, I mean, this is the only way you're going to fix it. You got to put that family back together. Even if mom and dad don't want to get back together, they have to at least come together to parent those children.
Absolutely.
Till they're able to be parents of their own. So, I don't know any other way to put it.
Well, I'd like to build off something General talked about. In regards to the African American family, social conservatives just love to point their fingers at the Democratic Party and say, the Democratic Party is responsible for the breakup of the black family. Yet, what we see happening with the rest of society in America, our politicians are silent about it. They love to beat their chest and wear their white hat and talk about family values, but they don't want to talk about this forced father absence problem.
Silent about it across the board.
Yeah.
There are very few politicians that will speak up on the issue.
And see, I want to be clear. This is not just a black issue.
Right.
But I'm just saying it affects us more disparately than other cultures. But it's affecting America as a whole.
Yes.
Because America in general is going down because we don't have fathers in the home anymore. And one thing I want to talk about for sure is this tactic that the courts have taken on, or your spouse, your ex-spouse, is filing false allegations of domestic abuse. Okay, because once you get that process started, okay, automatically the guy is put out of his home. He can't have any contact with his spouse or his kids. He can't go back in his house. So let's pray that he don't have a home-based business that he runs out of, because now he got to find somewhere to live. He can't go back home and get his checkbook or nothing else. And until he gets his hearing with the court, okay, he's got to stay away from his kids, his money, his family, his house, and everything. But he still has to survive. So let's just hope he has a good extended family out there where he can find somewhere to sleep and somebody can help him out until they get their first primary hearing. But then again, they may continue that. And I'm speaking about that because I had to go through that. I went through that, went over 3 months without seeing my son. And then when I was finally able to see him, we went through this whole process for another 1.5 years, and I had to fight these false allegations. I was finally acquitted, although it took up all my resources, all my savings, everything that I had. And then the judge still gave her primary custody of our son, and I'm supposed to have him the first, third, and fifth weekends of every month, and we alternate every 2 weeks in the summer. But that goes back to what I said earlier about the enforcement. It's been 5 years since I seen my son, and the judge refused to even sign a motion for contempt or order to show cause to have it brought to court.
And in general speaks of this, and he's a big guy, and you might be thinking false allegations, well, I don't know. But the truth of the matter is, we were sitting in a family law study committee meeting up in Chicago, up in Waukegan, Illinois, in January of last year, when a prominent attorney got up and testified before the committee that it was common practice for attorneys to file false allegations of abuse in order to spin litigation in the client's favor. Now, when you hear somebody from the Bar Association who swore under oath before a legislative committee state that should send chills up your spine.
Yes.
That's more than just General standing here saying, look, I was a victim of this, or that is somebody recognizing that this is a common practice within our state. In the Department of Children and Family Services, there was last year, if I remember correctly, 111,000 reported cases of domestic violence and abuse and neglect in children. Out of that 111,000, only 28,000 had any indications of abuse.